Hello, this is the next video in the series of Ad-Hoc reports in Cobblestone Contract Insight. In this video, we're going to be focusing on field selection and filters and conditions. If you haven't watched the previous videos in this series, I do recommend watching them. If you haven't watched them already and aren't comfortable with the previous tabs and topics in report management, if you already are familiar with those topics, jump right into this. But again, the foundation is important to understand what we're doing here. So, right, let's talk about field selection first. We're really doing two things in field selection. First, we are choosing the columns that we'll display in the report, so the data you're going to see. And I said this in the very first video on ad hoc reports, that you'll decide from report to report which information you want to see. So it's important to choose what's right for you. Of course, the fields that you can choose are going to be based on your system and the fields that you have in the table that you're working with. And then number two, the fields that you select can be used as filters and conditions in the next tab. We'll circle back to that in a minute, though. For now, put that on the back burner. Let's talk about choosing the column headers. That's really important. And one of the first things that I'll do when I'm building an ad hoc report, I'll think to myself, hey, what's important to see on this report? So we'll start with that. I like to go to click to add field right there. And then from the drop down list, I think it's easiest to just use Control F. And then I'll just start typing what I'm looking for. I almost always start with the contract title or the company name or, whatever the title field is of the table that I'm working with. So in this case, it's contract title. I'll choose that. Then there are a few settings I can toggle. Well, first I have the display name. If I want to adjust that name, hey, contract name, I could do that. I could adjust this a little bit if I want to. Not really too necessary in this case, but I could. Show on report. If you want the contract title to be a column like this, definitely have that setting set to true. We'll get to this in a minute, but if you are just using this field, say contract title, as a condition, and that's not really necessary for display purposes, you could unselect that, but we'll get to that when we get to filters and conditions. For the most part, you'll set this to true. Allow editing of this field. Okay, so we talked about this in a previous video, but if I am running a report, I may see the edit row button on the left-hand side. I can simply click that, and I can quickly edit some of the fields from that record directly from the report. I don't need to click the view button. So it's pretty convenient if there are certain fields you want to edit often. The master setting for this is back in overview, as discussed in the previous video. And this is where I can select, of course, which fields I want to be editable. I'll have this selected if I want them to be edited, and I'll just simply, have that set to false if I don't need them edited. Finally, we have a setting called Add Multiple Fields. Pretty simple, and I think pretty self-explanatory. If you want this pop-up to stay up, to make it easier to add fields, have that set to true. Okay, so I'll do that right now. I'll have contract title selected. I'll click Add Field. And there we go. The pop-up stays up. If I were to close this pop-up at any point, when I'm done adding fields, you'll see all the fields that you had added while the pop-up was open are now added to the field selection. Now let's add one more field. I'll click to add field. And I want to add the counterparty name field in this case. This is a really good example of another rule when selecting fields in ad hoc reports. Sometimes you'll choose a field, and you'll see this extra drop-down list for select linked field. When you see that, please don't ignore it. You definitely want to click that drop-down list, and you're going to see all of the other fields from the table that you selected here. So what's happening is Cobblestone's asking you to be a bit more specific, because counterparty name is a field that is actually referencing the counterparty or company table in the system. Right? And if I jump over to my counterparty list, we're going to see a whole bunch of information here. Their name, type, email, employee contact, type, city, so on and so forth. And that's what this drop-down list is showing me. Counterparty name is not just a simple field on a contract. It's actually a reference field that is referencing the vendor customer table. And there are a few other fields that you can select that would do the same thing. So if I had chosen the employee field, it would pull up my employee table and say, hey, which employee field do you want? Their first name, their last name, their email address, etc. As well as many of the items under master reference data, departments, locations, record types, and statuses. If you had chosen any of those fields in this drop-down list, it would give you a similar linked field drop-down. Okay, and most of the time when you're in this list, you just have to tell the system what you're actually looking for. If you're looking for counterparty name, you're probably looking for company name, right? That's what the field name is in this table that I'm working with. But hey, maybe you're not. I mean, maybe you're looking for their termination date, or the annual review date, or their phone number, right? So there's totally other reasons that you could be looking for other pieces of information from that other table. It just so happens in this case, I am just looking for the company name. This is also a situation you might want to adjust the display name. Okay, so it came up as company name dash counterparty name. This is more like the field name on the contract table. This is then the field name on the vendor customer table, and I can really go with whatever I prefer. I'll just remove that bit here, and I'll click Add. Next, there's a field you almost always want to include on your ad hoc reports. So first, let me explain that there is this View button on all of the ad hoc reports that I've been showing you so far. And of course, this takes me over to the contract, over to the details page of the record that I'm working with, right? However, that View button is not there automatically. I need to add that View button. It's pretty simple once you know how it works, but it's not necessarily intuitive, so take a note of this if you're taking notes. You want to add the ID field of the respective table that you're working with. So right now I'm working with the contract table, so I want to make sure I add my contract ID field. So I'm just going to go back, click the Add field, find contract ID in the drop-down list, and then click Add. If I'm working with requests, I want request ID. I'm working with employees, I want to choose employee ID, right? But most of the time we're building contract reports, so you want to choose contract ID in that case. This will give me the View button. This is an important step, but if you do forget it, not a big deal. You'll notice the View button is missing. When you run the report, you'll come back, edit the fields, and then you'll add the ID field. Next, you may change the order of the columns on the report, and it's really as simple as just dragging and dropping the fields up and down, right? And that will change the order they are displayed. Just a tip, don't drag over there or drag up here. You want to just very carefully move it up. You'll see that little dotted line right there, and that's where you want to unclick. Okay, so just do it slowly until you get the feel of it. Some folks do that sort of thing, right? And nope, do it here, nope, right there. See the dotted line, unclick. And then, of course, you can click the X icon to remove the field if you no longer need that field or you accidentally added the wrong one. And the last thing I'm going to show in field selection is that we can add fields to any of the subtables that we've selected. Again, we don't do this very often, but it can be useful. All you have to do is choose the subtable from this Select Table to Manage dropdown, and then click to Add Field. And then it's really the same thing. If I want to see the amendment date, we'll just choose that. Maybe click Add Multiple, and then Add Field. Okay, now I could wash, rinse, repeat. And that's really everything we need to know about adding fields for now. I'm going to fast forward a bit, add a few extra fields to the report, and then we'll pick up over here with filters and conditions. So now here we are in filters and conditions, and I'd argue this is the most important part of building an ad hoc report. The system only shows records that meet the exact conditions that you establish here. Just because I went ahead and named this active contracts over $100,000 doesn't mean the system knows what that means or which contracts to show me. I have to tell it very specifically. And I'm going to do this using this condition bar right down here. And the most common button you're going to select here is this second one. And if you hover over it, it will say Add Expression. So simply just click Add Expression. Then we'll have a drop-down list of all of the available fields that I chose back here in field selection. During the pause, I chose department, status name, and contract amount as some extra fields. Okay. So I'm going to choose a field, choose a filter, and then choose a value to filter by. Now, what I usually do is I take a look at the name of the report and I think to myself, okay, which fields do I need to add here to show active contracts that are over $100,000? And I'll start with the easier one first. It's $100,000. So I'm going to choose the contract amount. I know in my system, the field that would show me things above or below a certain dollar amount is the contract amount. It's possible it's called something different in your system, but contract amount is the out-of-the-box field for that. So I'll choose contract amount. In this case, it's under $100,000. So maybe I'll go with less than 100,000. We're not necessarily done with our conditions yet, but if I were, I do want to scroll down just a bit and then click Save and Preview. This saves the conditions I just input and gives me a nice preview of them so I can make sure everything is looking good so far. Now let's add one more condition. I'll click that Add Expression button again. This time I want to choose status name, and I'll simply just type in active, equal to active. I'll click Save and Preview. And there we go. Those are all of the contracts I have in my system that are under $100,000 and active. You're going to notice that status name always says active here. So this is a good occasion where I would flip back to field selection and probably turn that field off, or turn the visibility of the field off, I should say, and then click Save. And then if I go back to filters and conditions, I won't see it. It was really a redundant field. It had the same value every time, so there's not really any need to see it. Next, we won't go into this in too much depth, but you can add extra groups here, like this. You can click the Add Group button, and then each group can have a number of conditions or expressions underneath it. And these groups begin with an operator, so I can flip this one to OR. And the way this will work is anything under an AND group will say, all of these conditions must be met. And if you're in an OR group, it means any of these conditions must be met. So a simple example, maybe choosing department, and I could say, hey, the legal department or the administration department. And then if I click Save and Preview there, it's still going to show me contracts that are active and less than $100,000, but now are either in legal or administration, and there we go. It looks like I only have ones in legal, but that's totally fine. This does work properly. And we can have a lot of fun making the conditions very simple or complex. It really depends on what you're looking for, but you have a lot of flexibility and freedom with how you set this up. A big part of this is understanding which fields in your system will you use to build these conditions. And then if the condition is not yet selected here, it's not in this drop-down list, you want to move back to field selection and add that field. And that wraps up this video on field selection and filters and conditions. Later on in this series, we are going to talk about some slightly more intermediate filter and condition settings. So check out that later video for more information on that. Thank you.